Hachiko Waits Chapter 10. This material is from the Fountas and Pinnell classroom and is being used with permission. Chapter 10. The day after Hachiko died, Yasuo came to the train station as he always did. He was so used to visiting Hachiko and the station master, he did not know what else to do. So he sat down on a wooden bench near the train tracks and looked at the passengers as they exited their trains. As he watched, two women dressed in flowered kimonos stepped onto the platform. They turned eagerly toward Hachiko's waiting place. When they saw that he was not there, they looked at each other in confusion. Yasuo rose from his bench and walked over to them. Hachiko's heart stopped beating yesterday, he said, bowing his head with grief. I am so sorry, both women said at once. The Akita-ken has died? A student holding a stack of books in his arms stopped in his tracks, stunned. Chuken Hachiko is no longer with us, a young mother told her son. Word of Hachiko's death spread quickly through Shibuya Station. As each train pulled up to the platform, the people who stepped off looked to Hachiko's spot as if they could not believe what they were being told. The expressions on their faces turned from hope to pain and sorrow as they saw that the news was true. It was almost more than Yasuo could bear. Yasuo returned to the wooden bench and sat down wearily. He looked at Hachiko's spot and then shut his eyes. If only when he opened them he would see his little friend sitting up tall and straight among the crowd, his gaze fixed on the train tracks as he waited for his master. Yasuo squeezed his eyes shut even more tightly and then opened them again, hoping for a miracle. But Hachiko's spot was as empty as it had been just moments before. Even though many people were getting off their trains, no one walked over the place where Hachiko had once waited. Yasuo slumped down on the bench, stared straight ahead, and watched person after person walk around Hachiko's spot, just as they had when he was alive. And then he got an idea. He went to Mr. Yoshikawa's office and asked his friend to come sit with him on the wooden bench. I have just thought of a way to bring Hachiko back, Yasuo said. Mr. Yoshikawa looked at him, his eyebrows knitted together in puzzlement. How? He asked. Do you see the people getting off their trains? Asked Yasuo. The station master nodded. Do you see how everyone looks at the spot where Hachiko used to sit? The station master nodded again. What if we built a statue of Hachiko and placed it on his spot? Yasuo asked. Then he will always be with us. That is a wonderful idea, said Mr. Yoshikawa. But where will we find the money to pay for it? Excuse me, I do not mean to intrude, said a man wearing thick black-framed glasses. But I could not help overhearing your conversation. I do not have much money, but I miss seeing Hachiko sitting there. I will give you what I can to help build the statue. And with that, the man pressed a small silver coin with a hole in the middle, worth 5 sen, into the station master's white-gloved hand. I will give something too, a woman said, opening her pocketbook. More and more people donated money, and again, a story about Hachiko was printed in the newspaper. People from all over Japan were so moved by the tale of the loyal, faithful dog that they sent as much money as they could. After more newspaper stories were written, more people heard about Hachiko. People from as near as the next street over and as far away as the United States all sent money to help pay for a statue to be placed at Shibuya Station. By the time the summer rains had ended, enough money had been collected to pay for the statue. After much discussion, a well-respected sculptor was selected for the job. He came to the train station to speak with Yasuo. "Tell me about Hachiko," said the artist. "I understand you knew him best." "This is where he waited," Yasuo said, showing the man the place where Hachiko used to sit. "And when he sat up, the top of his head came to about here." He put the flat of his hand up to his hip. His eyes were deep set and small, and his ears were shaped like triangles. "Yes, I have seen the pictures in the newspapers," said the artist. "Can you tell me something about him I could not see in a photograph?" Yasuo thought for a moment. "Hachiko is completely devoted to Professor Ueno," he said. "Many people wanted to adopt him, but he would not give his heart to anyone but his master." "Ah, that is very helpful," said the sculptor, nodding. "He was kind to all and treated everyone in the same manner," Yasuo went on. "It did not matter if you were a child or an adult. It did not matter if you were a man or a woman. It did not matter if you were rich or poor. If you wanted to touch Hachiko's fur for luck, he would allow it. He was gentle with everyone. He got upset only when someone tried to move him from his waiting spot." "I see," said the artist. "Is there anything else?" Yasuo shut his eyes, and a picture of Hachiko arose in his mind. "He was always very dignified," he said, swallowing hard. "Even at the end, when he could not sit up tall and straight, he always did his best." "Arigato, Yasuo," the man said. "I now have what I need." And with a bow of thanks, he left the station. The sculptor went to his studio at once. Day after day after day, he locked himself inside his workspace, but he would not permit anyone to enter. "I will let you know when the sculpture is finished," he said whenever anyone came to his door. Month after month went by, and still there was no word from the sculptor. Almost a whole year had passed since the day Hachiko had died, and it was spring again. Then, right after the cherry blossoms bloomed and fell from the trees, the artist announced that the statue was ready. It was covered with a white cloth and brought to Shibuya Station, where a great ceremony was held. Trains scheduled to enter the station were halted between 3 and 4 o'clock. People started arriving at 2:30, and by the time Yasuo and his parents reached the station, an enormous crowd had gathered. People spilled over from the platform into the train station, down the steps, and onto the street. Yasuo struggled to move through the solid wall of people like a carp swimming upstream. He looked back over his shoulder several times to make sure his mother and father were following him. At last, they reached the platform and made their way over to the station master, who was standing next to Hachiko's waiting spot. "There are so many people here," Yasuo said in amazement. "Yes," said Mr. Yoshikawa. "There are teachers and students from Tokyo Imperial University who knew Professor Ueno. There are commuters who knew Chuken Hachiko." He pointed to a group of men holding their notebooks and cameras. "And there are also reporters." At precisely 3 o'clock, a Shinto priest began the ceremony by saying a prayer that expressed gratitude for the ancestors. Then he asked that those gathered before him would be blessed with health, happiness, prosperity, and protection. Next, a man who had taught at the university alongside Professor Ueno said a few words. Professor Ezeburo Ueno loved the earth, and he loved all the plants, trees, and flowers that grow upon it, said the professor's colleague. He loved to teach, and he loved his students. But most of all, he loved his golden brown Akita Ken. The artist who had created the sculpture was next to address the crowd. Many of you have been curious about what I have been doing for the past year, he said. You wondered why no noise came from my studio and why no supplies were carried in or out. This is because I had to prepare myself for the great task I was given. He gestured toward the statue, still hidden from view under its cloth. I needed to sit still for many, many hours, just as Hachiko sat, in order to understand him and appreciate him, the artist said. Only after I had experienced enough stillness and solitude did I feel ready to begin. And then I knew at once exactly what to do. Finally, Mr. Yoshikawa spoke. First, he thanked everyone who had donated money to build Hachiko's statue. Without each and every one of you, this would not be possible, he said, spreading his arms wide. Then he motioned for Yasuo to join him. I would like to present Yasuo Takahashi, the station master said to the people standing on the platform. He was a great friend to Hachiko, and I am sure he has something to say. Yasuo stood still and looked at the station master. Mr. Yoshikawa nodded and motioned again. They are waiting, Yasuo, Mr. Takahashi whispered to his son. Just say what is in your heart, Mrs. Takahashi added. Yasuo took a deep breath, stepped in front of the statue, and bowed his respects to the crowd. Hachiko taught us many things, he began. But then he had to stop. His voice was thick with tears, and his words sounded broken and shaky. Yasuo blinked his eyes and swallowed hard. The train station, usually such a noisy place, was completely quiet as Yasuo struggled to calm himself. He looked into the crowd and noticed a little boy in a navy blue sailor suit holding his mother's hand. The boy looked to be about 5 years old, the same age Yasuo was on the day he first met the professor and Hachiko. When the little boy saw Yasuo looking at him, his face broke into a smile. Yasuo smiled back and felt brave enough to go on. Hachiko taught us that we must never give up. Yasuo said. He taught us about loyalty and devotion. He taught us about hope and faith. He taught us about patience and responsibility. But above all, Hachiko taught us the true meaning of friendship. It is for these reasons we honor him today. Yasuo moved closer to the statue and asked Mr. Yoshikawa to join him. Together, they removed the cloth and stepped back. Everyone gasped. The Akita Ken, made of bronze, raised high on a pedestal, was Hachiko, sitting up tall and straight, his right ear thrust forward, his left ear drooping down, his eyes staring ahead. Yasuo reached up to stroke the sculpture, half expecting to feel soft fur instead of hard metal beneath his fingertips. What a good dog you are, Yasuo whispered to the statue. What a fine dog you are, Hachiko. You are the best dog in all of Japan.